Good evening and welcome everyone. Greetings from Wolfville and the Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kma'ki people. My name is Vicki McCrimmon. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Executive Director of Donor Relations in the Office of Advancement at Acadia. It's my pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm a bit of a stand-in. Una Proudfoot, our Executive Director, Alumni Relations, who normally hosts a number of these virtual events. With things the way they are with air travel these days, her flight was canceled and she's just about to land in Halifax, but was not going to make it for this. So I'm joining this evening. We are pleased to have Dr. Alicia Noreiga, Assistant Professor in the Department of Community Development, joining us this evening. And she's going to be addressing inequalities that hinder rural communities, community development. Dr. Noreiga has her Bachelor of Education, her Master's of Education, and her PhD. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Community Development at Acadia University. Alicia is interested in studies that promote social justice and equality or equity. Through her academic focus and advocacy, Alicia hopes to raise awareness and assist in transforming inequitable systems that disadvantage marginalized peoples and groups. As such, her research path includes critical participatory methodologies that amplify the voice of queer, Black, and rural communities, and among people experiencing the intersections of these characteristics. Thank you, Dr. Noreiga, for joining us today. I have a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. We ask that everyone keep their microphone muted so we can avoid background noise. And when the presentation starts, to disable your camera. We will welcome questions at the end and we encourage that. It's great to have conversation at the end and talk about the presentation. And so please feel free to hold those questions till the end and we'll reach out to you. And finally, we will have a draw prize for those attending this evening, and we'll announce that at the end of our session today. So Dr. Noreiga, thank you so much, and over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Vicki. And thanks so much for stepping in for Una impromptu and doing such a fantastic job at introducing me. So yeah, I'm so happy to be here. And I'd right away go into sharing my slide. Hope it works this time. Yes, I think it will. Great. Right. Is everyone able to see my slide? Vicki, are you seeing, is my slide visible? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So thank you all so much for attending, for allowing me the opportunity to share my work. I'm always so excited when I have the opportunity to share my research and my interests. So as Vicki mentioned, my name is Alicia Noreiga. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Community Development. I'm sort of a newbie. This is my first year at Acadia University. I started in July of last year. So I'm just so excited to be with such a supportive team and by extension, university. Before I studied my PhD, as again, Vicki said, with the University of New Brunswick. And prior to that, coming into UNB and Canada in 2018, I resided and spent most of my life in Trinidad and Tobago, Twin Island, Caribbean countries, sun, sand, and sea. So today I will be presenting to you my doctoral study, and the title of this presentation is Forging School Community Partnerships, Addressing Inequities that Hinder Rural Community Development. But before I go on, I'll first like to acknowledge that the community, Acadia University, is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And the treaties that govern, Treaty of Peace and Friendship that govern the agreements and signed by these people on the crown, by the Mi'kmaq Wolastoq people on the crown in 1726, It is always important, and I do recognize, acknowledge the opportunity to use the space for my professional development, the generosity of the holders of this space, the caretakers for centuries of for this space, and me now being able to use this for my academic development. I also want to recognize the African Nova Scotian, the over 50 communities, and the over 400 years of history that is in Mi'kmaqui. Um, and the ways in which our forefathers, and I say our forefathers because I am from the Caribbean, I am also someone of African descent, and the ways in which our forefathers has struggled, has fought, have overcome, and has been a stalwart in Nova Scotia and beyond throughout globally. And in this special month of African Heritage Month, recognizing their contribution even more so. So before I start a bit speaking about my doctoral research, I would like to position myself within this presentation and my study. So as I mentioned, I am from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm a citizen of that Twin Island state. I am a Black cisgender woman. I grew up in a rural community, so I'm a rural resident. I've spent most of my life in a small coastal rural community in Trinidad and Tobago. I am a rural educator. I taught in rural schools for 19 years prior to coming to Canada. I'm also a parent whose child attended rural schools, and I am now an emerging scholar. As I mentioned, not too long graduated from UNB with my doctoral research. And so now I acknowledge the privilege, my power, my position to be able to use academia now to instill change. So before I would like to give a brief overview of Trinidad and Tobago's education system, just because it's pertinent to my study, and it's a bit different from Canada's education system. So Trinidad and Tobago, at the age of 3 to 5, kids can attend early childhood center, have early childhood education compulsory. So it's optional, but most parents send their students to early childhood centers. Then compulsory education starts at the age of 5. And between the ages of 5 to 11, students engage in primary school education, similar to what they call elementary school here in Canada. Now, primary schools, if you look at there, it's a combination of government school and denominational school. Now, denominational schools are religiously or controlled schools. They are all public schools, though they are not private schools. So it's not paid, it's government assisted, it's covered by the government, but it's run by various religious boards. And from ages 5 to 11, students would attend any one of these schools. Now, important to note is that denominational schools are usually, because of the colonial influence in Trinidad and Tobago's education system, they are usually deemed prestigious. They are deemed the schools that everyone wants to go to, and they are also deemed as being the highly academic schools. With that in mind, government denominational schools are seldom located in rural areas. So at the end of primary school, at the age of approximately 11 years, students need to sit a high stakes examination called the secondary entrance assessment examination. And now this examination determines what type of secondary school you'll attend. Now, secondary school is comparable to high school, and again, similar to the primary schools, secondary schools, there's a combination of denominational schools and government schools. And again, the denominational schools are deemed prestigious. They are highly academic. And the government schools, quite a bit of them are more geared towards trade schools, learning trades, vocational studies and stuff. So what you find, parents, schools, invest highly in preparing students for that SEA examination because it determines what type of secondary school they attend. And what based on the secondary school that you attend, then that would help determine what kind of future career you're going to have. Because if you're in a school, if you get yourself into a school that's highly denominational, that's a denominational school that's highly academic, it would help determine what sort of career path you're going to follow, as opposed to a less highly academic school, one that more focused on vocational training. So what we find, again, a lot of these denominational schools are located in urban centers. So therefore, rural schools, um, a lot of these schools are more geared towards vocational training and stuff. And then finally, again, students sit a high stake exam at the end of their secondary schooling, where they sit anywhere between 5 to 8 subjects that they would have pursued within their last 2 years of secondary schooling. And that helps determine again, what type of employment they would have, or what type of tertiary education, if they decide that they want to go the tertiary education route. It helps determine acceptance into universities. So with that little background, I'll share now about my doctoral research. So with those things in mind, I wanted to ask the question and seek to answer the question: what are the perceptions of Trinidad and Tobago's rural educators, students, community members regarding school community partnerships in promoting community development? Now, to do this, I looked at one rural coastal community in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, this really is a combination of 4 smaller villages and their neighboring villages. So I clumped them all into one community, and they do sort of consider themselves part of one larger community. So I grouped them together, those 4 villages, and I gave them the pseudonym, or they with me would decided on a pseudonym, Coral Coast, and one secondary school. Now that secondary school is the community Coral Coast is like catchment area for that secondary school. So the majority of students that are from the community attends that secondary school after they're done with their SEA exam. And my participants were 12 educators that attend what from the school, which is most of the school staff. 19 students. Those students were just about ready to graduate from the school. 47 community members of various positions within the community. There were some that were parents, some that were community leaders, some that were local business people. And then and to collect data, I did questionnaires, semi-structured interviews, zines, observations, and I had my research journals. I'll dive straight into some of the main findings that I want to share today that is important in the understanding of inequities that exist in rural communities. And this picture to my left, I'm not sure if it's on your left on the screen, is a picture that one community member shared with me when I asked them about why do they love their community? What are some of the strengths that they find from their community? This was a picture of a sunset. And when the community members spoke about the beauty that exists within their community, what have them so attached to it, this is a picture that they found and they shared with me. It speaks for itself. Community members found that their community was one in which there was low crime, and for that they felt that sense of safety within their community. For example, one participant spoke about not having to worry about their kids being outside all hours in the evening. Their kids could go on errands, go to the shop, to the grocery for them, run errands, visit without them needing to supervise them because they didn't believe that there was going to be any harm towards them. Other community members spoke of the close knit that there is between the community where parents, neighbors grew up together, so that, like for example, Brandon spoke of the ways, if you have a child and you live in the city, you're going to have to find a nursery, or hire a babysitter. But in the community, there's always someone there to watch over your kids for you. So that there is that closeness that exists within the community. And two of the main, well, three of that beauty, that close knit relationship, and that low crime, community members felt was the highlight, main strengths of their communities. But although they found that there was so much good within their communities, they also found that there were challenges that they believe that they experienced. And my take from the whole discussion was that often globalization, neoliberalization, this industrialization that is present now, it increases competition for small countries like Trinidad and Tobago, and then more so for rural communities. So because of this capitalist emphasis that's embedded in colonialism, embedded in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, there becomes a rural urban disparity because the drive in order to compete needs that there has to be this more industrial focus. And these are often rural, sorry, pardon me, I meant to say these are often urban focuses because urban spaces are usually the centers, their brain of all these industrial actions. So what it leads is that education, development focuses on it's inequitable because it's usually geared towards urban development or it is urbanized and usually takes place in urban settings. So what it results in that rural schools, the curriculum is geared towards urban development without taking into consideration much what's needed in rural communities. So rural communities find themselves now without choice or with little choice but to follow an urbanized curriculum that does not, one, cater to the challenges that rural communities exist, and does not, two, capitalize on all that there is. For example, what I just spoke about in the previous slide, all the potential that the rural community has, and therefore being able to allow them to help develop themselves. Education does not cater much space for that, and in turn, rural communities find themselves dealing with unemployment, low academic skill levels, limited services and infrastructure, increase in illegal drug use and activities, out migration, which comes with a barrage of challenges itself, food insecurity, and poverty. But amongst all those challenges, that the community of people in Coral Coast spoke about so much potential that they see within their community, so much ways that they believe that their community could grow economically, and what was important that they believe, which I would show us, that a lot of the challenges that they experience are due to limited economic stability, and that if they had more stability, then a lot of their challenges won't exist. They found that their fishing, their tourism, and their agriculture sectors were the main sectors that they already utilize and that can develop. But unfortunately, similar to how that urban-centric focus um, creates inequities for them, the community members found that there was this inequity in focus. There was this inequity in wanting to capitalize, but also the inequities of wanting rural community members to grow. So this first, their navel string not buried here. A quick overview of what that means. Now your navel string, and this is how it's spoken, how Trinidad and Tobago and Caribbean people will say it. So there is this traditional belief that your navel string, which is your umbilical cord. So when a baby borns, after a few days, that umbilical cord will fall off. And it is a custom, a traditional belief that when that umbilical cord falls off, the parents would take it and bury it somewhere. And they believe that wherever they bury that umbilical cord, that's where the child will grow, that's where the child will stay, And that's where the child will have a vested interest in. So, for example, many parents like to bury it at the back of their house or somewhere close to their home because they believe that the child will keep this close connection to home. Other parents may bury it by a fruit tree, again within the yard, and they will believe that as the fruit tree grows and bear fruit, so the child will also grow and prosper. I asked my mom where mine was, and she told me they had buried it in a banana stool at the back of the house in my time. So they believed that there was this vested interest. So when participants like Tony and other participants share the same belief that their navel string not buried here, they're referring to business people who owned a lot of the businesses, who own the boats, the hotels and the resorts, but they do not have a vested interest in the actual community development. They also felt, though, that educators with naval strength weren't buried there, in that all the educators from the school do not reside in that rural community, and only one educator spoke about once teaching in another rural school, but they are all from the city. And the community members felt that they did not understand the culture and they did not have this vested interest in what it means to develop their community. Instead, they felt that a lot of educators educating their students, their kids to leave in and go into the city and not contribute much towards the community development. So that's where the school comes in. When we speak of education, we're speaking of the ways in which the school can play a significant part. And there is schools, rural schools globally play a unique part in rural community development. Often rural schools are the center of rural communities. It's the safe haven when it's time comes for storms and natural disasters. It's always or many times an event place for events, the place that they will keep weddings and they will keep other celebrations. It's the place that will allow people to come together through sports and other activity. It's some of the center, this place that draws people together. So it does more than just educate students, but however, and that was showed, by the way, in this picture that you're seeing here, Bella's zine. Bella drew was one of the students, that is a student from my participants. Bella drew this zine to show herself at the beach, to show what she loved. But also there was the guitar that showed that she appreciated having her school there because her school was so close. She can take guitar lessons after school, and she believed that if she weren't living, if she was going to school in the city, she wouldn't be able to have take guitar lessons because she would have to reach home right after. She also showed herself walking to school, showing her and expressed how she was happy to be able to walk to school and back home. But even though there is so much potential, so much contribution, so much advantages of having a rural school, the school was still marred with negative perceptions. You see, similar to what I explained earlier, once you perform academically high in the essay exam, you're sent to one of the prestigious schools, which is outside, which is usually in the city. So attending your school, therefore, is almost like a symbol of an achievement, of failure, and therefore students feel like, I've heard the stories and you see where they didn't want to come to that school. The data from that I gathered showed that more than 90% of the students stated that their parents did not place their community school as one of the options for them to attend school. But when they did not get the amount of marks needed to attend a prestigious school, then they were placed into the school closest to them. So that it felt that the school felt attending that school signified failure. So that was there was that negative perception. And also that parents found that the curriculum was just too restrictive. There wasn't a good mesh between academic work and vocational studies. And therefore, and they also felt that things that were areas, educational areas that was geared that could have the potential to benefit the community directly was not part of that curriculum. And therefore they felt, as I say, the navel string weren't buried there, that people, the policymakers and the educators did not take into mind um, their situation and their potential and their challenges. So I geared my conversation towards, okay, so what if school and community have a close, meaningful partnership? If they work together, support each other, could they find ways of one, meeting the requirements of the high stakes examinations and the urban centric curriculum that they need to follow, but at the same time also include and focus on community development? And is there a way to work with the both if there is strong relationships, proactive, meaningful conversation and action between and solidarities between the school and communities? And both educators and community members believe that there was potential, and these are just some of the options or some of the visions, I would say, that they had when I asked them, okay, if we do, if you work towards and there is strong school community partnership, what do you see or what do you envision the school will be and the community would be like in the next 5 years? And these are some of the things they mentioned, because at the moment they felt that the relationship was extremely poor. It was restricted to PTA meetings and calling up a parent if a child misbehaves or something like that. A lot of the educators felt that that the parents were just not interested in their students, in their kids' education because they won't visit the school much. But at the same time, parents spoke of having to work in the city, and so therefore having to negotiate and prioritize between earning a living or attending PTA meetings. And that sort of common perception that attending PTA meetings was what constitutes school community partnership. And it did, and it was challenging, and I don't think I completely succeeded in my research in having people, but they did in some to some point though, envision partnership beyond PTA meetings, envision people really working together in other forms, assisting, volunteering in other ways, and doing helping with curriculums. And there was some times that they did, but it was very difficult for them to see beyond what their perception of it was, which was mainly parents coming to PTA meetings, parents volunteering when they're called for an event that the school is hosting, and parents probably assisting students with homework and ensuring that students attend school. So, but when after having that discussion, they did say that they would believe if they work together and support each other and form close bonds, the school will then become one of the first choices. So students won't want to get want to attend these prestigious schools in the city, which comes with a barrage of challenges traveling to the city every day and back. That students would develop holistically, both the vocational and the academic, that the community members would volunteer and be more active. They would help teach skills, whether it's for qualifications, certificates or not. They would help teach skills. The school would educate not only the students, but the entire community. And subjects would be directly related to the community choral course development. And as I close off, I just wanted to show this photo um, and this zine. So maybe I would start with my right, the zine. Now, this zine was created by, again, one of the students. Um, uh, Sam, I would call the student. And they spoke about that student. Sam reflected on school community partnerships and the way in which he felt that the school and community used to work together to stimulate the economy, create opportunities, but what it is now. So, and to my right is what Sam depicted as the past. And there you would see a football, soccer. Trinidad and Tobago, we call it football, a soccer field. And then there is a little shop that Sam drew, and next to the shop is the school. And they're showing that the sports, a football match is taking place. The shop is open. Someone or some people are patronizing in the shop. Business is going, and the school things are going happening. And then on the next side, you see what Sam depicted as present. And then he showed an empty field, nothing's taken place. The shop is closed, and Sam drew a tombstone to signify that the school, that the place is now dead, that nothing is happening. But Sam also expressed hope and the belief that they are, and that their generation, that class of students that I interviewed, has the potential to change things. So Sam shared words of support, of encouragement for his fellow himself and his fellow students, saying, don't focus on the pain, focus on the progress, getting back on the right track. And Sam shared the belief that he believed that they are the change makers. And that was an interesting fact. One of the visions that members of the community and school had, that a new generation would instill change, that a new generation would be able to have stronger bonds, focus, and work towards the community development. And at the next side, my left, I have a photo that I took of the community, of one vantage point in one of the communities. So I was sitting on the front porch of a participant conducting an interview. And I just looked at that photo, and that photo just brought something to my mind, or it's something that probably me, as an insider, someone from a rural community, would understand. And maybe, not every researcher might have internalized or and made this observation and conclusion. Now, if you're at the front of the community and you're reaching into the community, you see beauty. You see that beautiful beach that the participant took a photo of earlier. You also see houses which are well painted. Trinidad and Tobago, we love bright colors. So you would see these bright colored houses, pretty painted and stuff, and just a beautiful, serene community. This photo was taken showing from the back of the community. And what it showed, and if you look carefully, you would see that what you're seeing to the back are red bricks, meaning that it's not plastered, it's not complete, it's not finished. It's the raw brick that still has to be plastered. But it's not like that from the front. If you see the houses to the front, it's plastered, it's painted. So, and that photo brought to me two things. It represented, one, the ways in which rural communities, sometimes you just see that beauty from the front. You see, the wonderful, pretty painted houses, people smiling, and you think that this is heaven. But you need to go to the back. And when you're sitting in the back seat, it's then you can really see the challenges that sometimes exist. So that's one of my interpretation from this photo. Second interpretation was the strength of rural people, because this photo could also represent not giving up and not completing. From a house like this, from homes like these, addition can take place. So they have not settled on where they are and said, my house is now complete. They have hopes of continuing, they have hopes of expanding, and therefore it's unfinished because they want to move on. So with this, I want to say thank you so much for indulging me. Uh, Ah, yes. Thank you so much for indulging me. I am always, always happy to share my research. And as we go into asking questions, I also have a question for you. I would have to ask. There are quite a few times that I would stop sharing now. There I've shared on a few times. Well, within my entire research process, I've been sharing my work in conferences from the theoretical part to some of the initial data, and then my completed research. I would have shared it in Canadian forums, North American forums, I should say. And I've most of the times always heard at least one person comment on the ways in which, although these are the demographic, the geographical areas are different, but yet still some of the issues that I would have mentioned in my research is so much of the same that they experience, rural communities experience in Canada and other places. So my question for any of you in the viewing audience, have you experienced or have you knowledge of any of these challenges being similar to what takes place here in Canada as happens in Trinidad and Tobago? And with that, I thank you, Vicky. I'll turn it on to you to coordinate questions and answer. Feel free to ask anything.
Thank you, Dr. Noriega. That was fantastic. We'll turn it over to our attendees. Are there any questions for Dr. Noriega, or anyone would like to answer her question? Am I frozen to everyone else?
You're good. I'm hearing you.
Okay. I have a still shot from my face. Well, I have a question. I can't answer. I'm sure there's someone else who could answer your question better, Dr. Noriega, but I will tell you that my mother grew up in a very rural area in Ontario, and there were three children, and it was quite clear from an economic perspective and accessibility that only one of the kids were going to post-secondary, and despite her being the oldest, they chose her brother. And so she wasn't ever able to experience post-secondary. And it was particularly due to the fact that there wasn't post-secondary in the area. So the cost was just prohibitive for them to do three kids.
Um, that's very interesting because I would see, and even in that community, I I believe post-secondary education is now steadily now increasing and students wanting to pursue post-secondary education, but many of the young people want to work, go into the workplace, and it's mainly the men, the male, the boys would think about wanting to go straight into the workplace when they're done. I asked that question to students. So, what do they want their intent right after graduating? And the majority of them spoke of wanting to get into the workplace. I also asked them if they wanted to work in the city rather than their community, and they did also say that they wanted to work in the city. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. There's a push for them wanting to earn money, more than wanting to learn academic, especially among the boys. I'm not sure if the parents' view was the same though.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Any questions, Carrie?
Hi, thank you. This was lovely. So I'm Carrie. I'm in New Brunswick, actually. Acadia grad of 2016 in the dietetic program. But my role has been very different since landing in New Brunswick. I do community developer positions with our Department of Justice and Public Safety through a community capacity and resiliency branch that was just formed prior to the pandemic. And that's supporting our municipalities through a local government reform. And so I found it, very, I took a picture of the screen of the agriculture or the fisheries screen that you had presented, because that's often what we hear in a rural community that I'm working with right now. We have many that are from, fifth generation or more in the community. And then the new mandate of their local government reform is to, build that economic opportunity. And that becomes really terrifying for many of the locals. One, because they would not have been given that opportunity to either pursue themselves, or, they're scared of what their community will look like. So we're hosting many different conversations. But I think just what the point of, they need to be able to see that they are assets in the community and how can we build that up. So I thought I just more or less of a comment is that I really appreciated hearing that, because that's a big struggle that we're hearing across many rural communities in New Brunswick at this point.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that comment, Carrie. And you're quite right. There is that conflict and it was very apparent in my study with that wanting to maintain that peace, that beauty, that traditional, that look of that is rural community, and that's what they promote actually for the economic stability, and yet still also wanting to be part of this industrialization and this system, right? And wanted to negotiate the two. I think one of the amongst my participants, the community members, one of the areas in which they were more hesitant about when it came to investing, they was saying that even though they're going to invest, the government place money, they invest, it's not going to be for them, it's going to be for outsiders. They spoke of the way one person actually said, we work the boats, we don't own the boats. Another person spoke of the way in which they cannot get the loans, so that it would be the affluent members of in the urban society who are the ones that could get a loan to build a hotel or to buy a boat or whatnot. And therefore, again, they keep always being the one mainly benefiting and not the community members themselves. And so they remain stagnant. They remain the employees all the time and never the employers. So that left a bit of tension with them wanting development, but not wanting development if all the economic prosperity falls on the people living in urban spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And like even just seeing how, so I work part-time with justice and public safety, but I also work as a community school coordinator with our school district full-time. And so seeing how that school can be that community hub, trying to see if we can build that grassroots effort of empowering our locals, but also creating those how can we bring our people, so to speak, back to the community to invest what they learned and bring it back to the community that was once theirs. So anyway, I really appreciated this. Thank you so much.
Oh, again, thanks again. And that too was a huge discussion that we had. I mean, I don't have space and I didn't want to just clump too much of my information into the presentation, so I chose some. But out migration was certainly a huge discussion. And there were three things. There was on the one hand where participants were saying that students and kids need to leave when they're done. They need to go out there because they're like, what do we have here? How much nurses? You would just be, and I remember nurse was one of the professions they call. You could have a couple of nurses, a couple of teachers. What again is there for them? They need more. So in order for them to get more, they need to go out. And then there were the others which I was saying, no, they need to learn, they need to be exposed to skills and stuff that they can stay. And then there were the third group of people who were speaking about they need to go out, but then they need to come back. They need to go out, get that skill that's needed, but then they need to come back. And there was this interesting, beautiful zine that one student created, similar to the tool that I showed in my slides. And it depicted I can't remember the full story, but same thing it's in their community, and then it showed that she wanted to. There was her at a table in the classroom, depicting a classroom, and that she was heavy into her studies, but at the same time, it was so frustrating because she wanted to do so well, but was struggling to keep up. And then she did a final drawing showing that eventually she's going to be working in the city, and there were the big buildings and stuff, and then there was this tiny road that led to her house, And instead, because even though she wanted to work in the city, she wanted to come home every day, and that food was leading towards home. And now with with the place, that rural urban line is so much blurred now because transportation is way better. These things that it's not unrealistic that students or people could go to work in the city now and return home. So even all these things were options and discussions within the study.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Lee.
Yes, I'm going to turn on my camera for this, see if it goes well. Hi there. Thank you very much, Alicia, for presenting. It was a wonderful presentation to hear about your research in Trinidad and Tobago communities, especially as it relates to school community partnerships. I'm an Acadia student who's in the School of Education. I focus on secondary education, so middle school and high school. And so your question of have you experienced any of these challenges here in Nova Scotia? I can certainly speak to that. I grew up in southwestern Nova Scotia in the community of Yarmouth, and it's a very rural town on the coast, and the main industry for the past couple hundred years has been fishing. The fishing industry is one of the largest sectors in that area. In fact, it's one of the most well known in terms of the lobster fishery and various other fish products. And so when you're asking that question, certain challenges about the out migration and being drawn to other economic opportunities. Oh, hooray! Oh, it's so funny to see another person from Yarmouth there as well. It's kind of funny because again, the out migration thing. I was in that boat. I shipped out to go to university away from home because or post-secondary options are quite from the community, and so the closest option for me was Acadia, which is a couple and a half hours away. And even when I made that known to my school counselor at the time, they told me, what are you doing? You're applying to Acadia. You need to apply to a few other places because you need to spread your wings and go further. So I always felt this difficult tug, this pull between some folks really encouraging you need to go out and explore, you need to go farther out. At the same time, though, having such a deep connection to the place, it was so hard to kind of embrace that fully because of family, just all of these treasured aspects of rural living, whether it's being on the coast or going clamming with family. Just so anyhow, that's a bit of a ramble, but it's just to say that it's happening for a lot of communities. I know Yarmouth is not just the only one in Nova Scotia. I hear it from folks in Cape Breton. I often hear folks describe this and so that's to be the other extreme of the province in the northeast, like in Glace Bay. Just a lot of communities, and these ones in particular, I think the key aspect is that they tend to be quite far from the major urban center, which is Halifax. And so folks, like some of my peers growing up in high school, one of the most common things I heard was, it was kind of two camps. There were the folks who would say, oh, well, my father's a fisherman. Why do I need to do this in school? I'm just going to go out in my boat. And so they kind of just follow in the kind of the family tradition. And so there was kind of a suspicion of education by many of my peers because, well, I'm just going to go fishing anyway. Or the other reaction would be, well, this town doesn't really have anything for me here because I don't fish. It goes back to that whole issue of what do we know about our resources and assets of our community? Because honestly, I think even folks from the town, there's still this, like, when people ask about it, oh, well, we've got fishing and lobsters.
Uh, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's yeah, that's reality there, and that's where it is. Don't matter, cross borders. These are some of the issues. Out migration is
Hmm.
certainly one of the biggest challenge, and what motivation students have to pursue certain levels of education, and that's exactly what takes place in my research in my research at my research site. That why is it important I learn this when I'm not going to be able to use this in my community? Having that basic elementary education is quite enough to be able to fish and earn a living and take care of my family. So why is it? And then there is this big hooray and celebration when someone goes outside. When someone goes into the city, the families invest, schools invest so much to ensure that students go outside. And it starts from even that elementary, primary school level, where you see when I spoke about that high stakes exam, and parents and educators and students invest so much into being able to pass for that exam just to be able to go into a city school. And success, therefore, moves away from how much grades and the students' actual performance than, and instead it goes to how much of your students went outside. So you find that there is this competition amongst the elementary schools within the communities to see how many, and parents do sometimes they look for a family member who lives in a city and uses their address just so that in case the student does not get the marks to go to a prestigious school, then they would be placed, because once you don't go to a prestigious school, then you'll be placed into a school close to your catch to where you live. So therefore, once they have an address in the city, they would then be placed there. So they give them an aunt's address or someone else's address that they could, and then so that they could get into a city school. And then there's this huge celebration because you got to go outside. So there's this push away from, even myself, as I mentioned, I'm a rural, I grew up in a rural community, and I was one of the first people from my community to attend a prestigious school after sitting that exam. And, today, everyone celebrates my successes, but because I am outside, and they've always worked towards encourage me to be outside. And I left from my rural community eventually to the city, and then I moved from my rural country to Canada. And now, and well, even now, the celebration is 10 times more because I am in Canada. So yeah, it's really something that people, that push pull dynamic that comes with migration, and those that really just want to stay with their families, want to stay home in the safety of their family, what they've grown up with, and would rather sacrifice not having opportunities to be able to stay within that safety net of community.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Noriega. Any more questions or comments or something someone would like to share? Okay, I have a quick question, Dr. Noriega. Is there a rural community that you think somewhere in the world is doing this well?
There are organizations, there are communities that have been trying and has been speaking against, but it is an uphill climb. I really can't say if, research has been showing different initiatives that community have been taken has been taken in order to create, especially that connected community, showing community asset, bringing community asset into education. There is research that has shown where initiatives has taken place. But to say someone has totally gotten it, I believe as long as we're within a colonial system that perpetuates and reinforces that, that geared towards inequity because of capitalism and industrialization that keeps some spaces I would say, underdeveloped, and others the sacrifice, and there isn't that equitable distribution of revenue, of focus, then it's forever, it will never be there. So, although I can't say there probably is one, but I want to believe that there aren't, but there are organizations and communities that are trying their best to curb as much as they can.
Okay, thank you. Lee.
I guess your question, Vicky, kind of sparked another thought or comment, which is that, and I guess I was kind of alluding to it before, is this paradox where education is often perceived by many families as critical for improving your family's opportunities and well-being. And in fact, in Nova Scotia, we have many historic African Nova Scotian communities where this is something that the communities have championed often within their own community, whether that was in some instances the church leading extra curricular or tutoring opportunities, or whether this was the establishment of, say, like the Delmar Buddy Day Learning Institute. So what I guess I'm trying to say is there's a bit of a paradox, because education is this vehicle for improving and bettering our opportunities and access to. However, sometimes, or it seems that a lot of these opportunities end up being predominantly in urban centers. And this is always a risk of, as you saw in your own work or your own research that you presented, you mentioned I think it was the rural brain drain, where a lot of talented individuals or hardworking individuals will end up pursuing those opportunities, especially in urban centers, to, in some ways, remove some of the possible leadership that could exist at the community or rural level. So, yeah, on this paradox, and if you had maybe any insights into how can we foster that leadership at the local or rural level, so that we don't see the I guess the siphoning effect.
Yeah. I've heard it before, and I've used it also. I don't know who penned or coined the saying, though, that one of the myths that we believe and then we pass on to our kids is that if you have a good education, you're going to be successful in life, and ultimately successful in life. And that's not always the case, because once we're in an inequitable world, then it doesn't matter how educated you are. If if inequities exist, your chances, certain people chances of success, gonna be vastly different than others. And that falls into rural communities, that falls into race and all the other things that comes in. But at the same time, I also know that basic education is necessary. You need to have basic education, but you also need to have relevant education. You need to have something that provides realistic opportunities for persons. And unless there is a discourse, inclusion with rural communities and rural residents about what is relevant, what is realistic, and also that need to do both. There should not be, because we don't want at the same time to fully, let's say, go into vocational training schools in all rural communities. That's not the way to go either. There should be a good balance between these both, so that students, people who want to move and go outside could, but the ones that want to stay should also be skilled or equipped and offer that skill, that they could also stay and be meaningful and have meaningful employment and be prosperous within their communities. So yeah, there are so many dynamics that take place that impacts what where you'll be, how successful rural people will be, and where their lives will take them based on the type of education that they receive. There's so much to discuss about it, but I know we have to end now very soon. So I'll leave it there. I just want again thank you all so much for attending, for allowing me this opportunity to come to you and share my research. And I look forward for another opportunity sometime. Who knows?
Dr. Noreiga, thank you so much. That was fantastic and sparked a lot of conversation. So thank you so much for sharing your research.